In 1970, Britain ruled the road. By 1990, British truck manufacturing was dead. What happened in those 20 years? A Dutch truck with 3 windshield wipers changed everything. This is the story of how one vehicle destroyed an entire industry. The DAF-2800 didn't just compete. It crushed everything in its path, and the worst part, British companies saw it coming but couldn't stop it. For over half a century, names like Leyland, Foden and ERF dominated their home market. They weren't just brands, they were institutions. British drivers trusted them, British companies bought them, and British pride stood behind them. These companies had survived 2 world wars. They had built military vehicles that helped win battles. Their trucks carried goods that rebuilt Britain after the war. They were part of the national identity. Working at Leyland or Foden wasn't just a job. It was a badge of honour. Families had multiple generations working in the same factories. The pride ran deep. Then a small Dutch company decided to build something better. Not flashier, not cheaper, just better. This is how Britain lost the truck war. The British truck industry in the early 1970s was comfortable. Too comfortable. Order books were full. Delivery times stretched for months. Why change when everything seemed fine? British manufacturers thought they were untouchable. They controlled their home market. Export sales were steady. But comfort breeds complacency. And complacency kills industries. September 1973, Frankfurt, Germany. At the International Motor Show, DAF unveiled a truck that would change everything. The 2800 model rolled out with a wide cab, 3 windshield wipers, and Europe's first intercooled turbo diesel engine. Back in Britain, truck drivers didn't pay much attention. Why should they? Their trucks had Gardner engines, solid, trusted, proven over decades. But Gardner engines were old technology. They were reliable, yes, but they were also heavy. They used more fuel. They produced less power. British loyalty to Gardner was emotional, not rational. The Gardner engine had become a symbol, not a solution. But across the North Sea in the Netherlands, DAF had been building something special, a truck that would become Britain's biggest problem. The DAF-2800 came with an 11.6-litre engine, making 320 horsepower. But the power wasn't the whole story. The turbo intercooler was the secret weapon. This technology was 10 years ahead of other European trucks. DAF trucks got more pulling power, used less fuel, and could go faster than British diesel engines could match. The intercooler reduced the temperature of compressed air entering the engine. Cooler air is denser. Denser air means more oxygen. More oxygen means better combustion. Better combustion means more power and efficiency. It sounds simple now, but in 1973, this was cutting-edge technology. Then look at the cab where the driver sits. British trucks still squeezed drivers into small, uncomfortable spaces. The DAF-2800 was different. It had room for 2 full-size beds. Not a hard bench where you'd wake up with back pain. Real beds for drivers who spent weeks away from home. Big windows let in lots of light. You could see everything around you, which made driving safer. The cab tilted forward. This made fixing the engine easy. British trucks? You had to twist yourself like a pretzel just to check the oil. DAF understood something British makers forgot. The driver is a customer too, not just the company owner who buys the truck. Happy drivers mean better performance. They stay with companies longer. They take better care of the vehicles. They become brand ambassadors. DAF designed for both the buyer and the user. For years, British truck drivers stayed loyal to homegrown brands. But loyalty doesn't pay your bills when drivers keep leaving to work for companies with Volvo and DAF trucks. Swedish trucks had already shown what modern meant. The DAF-2800 proved it even more. British Leyland was once the 5th biggest vehicle maker in the whole world. but the company was dying. The British government owned it, and that created problems. Money that should have gone to making better trucks got spent trying to save the car-making side of the business. The government poured billions into British Leyland. Taxpayer money disappeared into a black hole. The car division needed constant bailouts. Meanwhile, the truck division that actually made money got nothing. Politicians cared about car jobs. Truck jobs didn't win elections. So trucks were sacrificed for politics. Michael Edwards ran British Leyland. He asked for money to build better trucks. He got some, but not enough, and it came too late. The Leyland Marathon came out in the early 1970s. This was supposed to compete with European trucks, but truck drivers looked at it and shook their heads. It was just old 1960s design with a new name. The Marathon rusted quickly. Finding spare parts was nearly impossible. One driver famously joked that the Marathon was called the Marathon because it could only run 26 miles before breaking down. The joke spread across Britain. It became the truck's reputation. Leyland never recovered from that joke. Foden was another famous brand. By 1980, they were in terrible trouble. They had been making 4,000 trucks every year. Now they could barely stay in business. An American company called Packard had to buy them just to keep the doors open. ERF was even worse. In 1981, they only sold 1,083 trucks in Britain, just over 1,000 trucks in their home country. These were signs that the industry was dying. In 1970, Britain had 20 different truck makers. On the European mainland, there were 45 companies making trucks, and many of them wanted to sell in Britain. They saw a market ready to be taken. The DAF 2800 was the truck that broke through. It wasn't fancy or flashy, it was just better. Drivers loved how comfortable it was. Company owners loved that it didn't break down. DAF had something called DAF-AID. If your truck broke down anywhere in Europe, help came fast. This was revolutionary. British companies offered a phone number and hope. When DAF launched the 2800 in 1973, they already had a good reputation. The truck before it, the DAF 2600, was called the mother of international transport. The 2800 didn't need to prove anything. It just needed to deliver. The 2600 had launched in 1962. It was revolutionary then too. Square cab design, maximum space for drivers. It set new standards for long-distance comfort. By 1973, DAF had over 10 years of experience building driver-focused trucks. The 2800 built on that foundation. It took everything good about the 2600 and made it better. What did Britain do? Leyland finally made the T45 road train in 1980. It was an okay truck, maybe even a good truck. But this was the truck they should have built 5 years earlier. The cab was smaller than the Volvo Globetrotter. It was narrower than the DAF Space Cab. Truck drivers noticed. More importantly, they complained. Bedford tried making big trucks too. They used American Detroit diesel engines. These engines were different from what British drivers knew. Drivers tested them and said no thanks. The engines felt wrong. They sounded strange. Bedford's TM trucks failed. By 1986, Bedford stopped making trucks completely. AEC was a famous brand that used to build thousands of trucks. They got swallowed up by British Leyland and disappeared. Guy, Albion, Scammell. These were names with proud histories. All sacrificed to try to save the car division. While British companies fell apart, DAF kept growing. In 1984, they made 13,645 trucks. In 1985, they made 14,382 trucks. DAF was growing while British makers were dying. The 1980s told the final story. Britain's truck industry didn't just get smaller, it got destroyed. By 1990, almost nothing was left. This was an industry that used to give thousands of people good jobs, skilled workers, engineers, designers, all gone. Towns like Leyland in Lancashire had been built around truck manufacturing. The Leyland factory was the heart of the community. When production slowed, shops closed, pubs emptied, schools lost students as families moved away looking for work, this wasn't just about trucks, it was about communities. The social cost was enormous. ERF survived. Dennis made specialty trucks and stayed alive. But everyone else? Dead or bought by foreign companies. In 1987, DAF merged with Leyland Trucks. The Dutch company that spent 15 years beating British trucks now owned the most famous British truck maker. In Britain, they called it Leyland DAF. Everywhere else, they just called it DAF. The takeover was complete. DAF itself ran into trouble in 1993. The company grew too fast and went bankrupt. Leyland came out as its own company again, but not for long. In 1998, Packard bought Leyland Trucks. The circle was complete. Today, DAF sells about 30% of all trucks in Britain. That's more than any other brand. The only medium and heavy-duty trucks still built in Britain are DAF trucks. They're made at the old Leyland factory. The irony is hard to miss. The factory that once produced purely British Leyland trucks now builds DAF trucks for the UK market. Some of the workers are the same. They watch their company die and get reborn under a foreign name. They're grateful for the jobs, but the pride is different now. The DAF 2800 didn't destroy British truck making in just a few years. It took 15 years of being better at everything. More comfortable trucks, better technology, better service, just plain better trucks. British truck makers had every chance to fight back. They could have invested in new designs. They could have listened to their drivers. Instead, they chose arguing with each other. Government control made decisions slow. They kept building the same old designs while the world changed around them. At the beginning of the 1970s, 20 British companies made trucks. By the end of the 1980s, only 2 independent British companies were left. The rest were history. The Dutch didn't beat Britain with tricks or luck. They built a better truck. They backed it up with better service. And they let British companies make their own mistakes. Sometimes the best strategy is just being better and waiting. The DAF 2800 was Britain's worst nightmare because it was just better in every way. Better comfort, better power, better fuel economy, better service, better everything that mattered. British companies saw it happening. Year after year, they watched DAF take their customers. They watched their drivers leave. They watched their sales fall and their factories close. The writing was on the wall in giant letters. But they couldn't stop it, or wouldn't change fast enough. The DAF 2800 crushed Britain's best trucks by being the truck that British companies should have built but didn't. By the time British makers finally understood what was happening, it was too late. The truck war was over, and a Dutch company won.